Hello, folks. Thank you for joining the Missouri Department of Conservation and Partners on our birding webinar on eBird and citizen science. Let us know if you could see and hear us through the chat box. And leading our presentation today, I'd like to welcome Sarah Kendrick with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She is an ornithologist and we'll be talking about eBirds and citizen science. So Sarah, let's go.
Sounds great, Joe. Hi, everybody. Do you want to say something about this slide, Joe?
Yes, thanks for joining us. Again, Sarah, and I'll be your host. We'll be taking questions at the end. So if you have questions, please put them in your chat box and we will answer them at the end as we have time. So thanks, Sarah. And what are we going to talk about today?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Kendrick. I'm excited to be here with you this evening. And tonight we're going to talk about eBird and citizen science. So I'll walk through just a few of the big topics. I always like to start off by talking about why we should care about birds in the first place. I'm going to talk a lot about eBird and recording how many you see and hear. But we really want to kind of set the stage just from the ground level and talk about why the heck should we care about birds. We're going to talk about what is eBird, what does that mean, how to use it, its uses for conservation and research, which I'm particularly interested in and excited about, and then using eBird for the Missouri Birding Challenge. Of course, this webinar series is to lead up to and kick off the inaugural Missouri Birding Challenge, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end of the presentation. So yeah, first of all, we want to talk about why we should care about birds. So we would hope that if you're tuning into this webinar, you understand the value of nature and you're into it and excited about it. But just to kind of set the stage here. So everything in nature serves a role, and birds are no different from that. They provide key services called ecosystem services that really help to keep our planet and its ecosystems in balance. And even humans, even us as humans, need birds for many different reasons. So birds they help with pest control. They eat 400 to 500 million tons of insects every single year across the globe.
Wow.
So that is very mind-blowing. And so 96% of land birds in North America eat insects. So even birds that eat grains and seeds that are bird feeders predominantly, they still need insects to feed their babies when they have young in the summer. So it's pretty wild how much they're helping us. Imagine the world without them, what they would do to agricultural crops, to our bodies, our quality of life. We wouldn't want to go outside. So they're really helping to put all of those things in check, those insect populations in check, by being their natural predators. Scavenging is also a very important role, like scavenging birds like vultures and others. These birds are so amazing. They remove disease from the landscape, literally. They can eat diseased dead things and carrion, dead wildlife from the landscape. And their stomach acids are so strong that they can metabolize and get rid of disease, and it doesn't come out the other end of the bird because that stomach acid is so strong. So they're removing disease from the landscape, both for other wildlife species and for humans, because sometimes that can spread to humans. And our last big one, which these are not extensive, these are not the only ecosystem services that our wonderful birds provide for us, but these are just the kind of the top three in my mind that we can all kind of connect with the easiest. But birds also pollinate. You've seen a lot of hummingbirds. They eat nectar out of our flowers in our backyard and in our gardens. So they provide that really amazing pollination service to help vegetate the earth. And then birds like this blue jay here on the left with his mouth stuffed full of acorns, they help with seed dispersal, and they actually help oaks to grow across the world. Birds like blue jays here, they cache acorns. They hide acorns for the following year or when the weather gets rough so they can go back and find them again. Well, they forget where about 30% of those acorns are that they cache in the ground and in dead trees. And so then those trees grow into acorns, and so they can help to vegetate our world.
That's fascinating. They're kind of like squirrels of the bird world.
Exactly. Yeah, squirrels do that too. Yep. So then we also want to talk about how do birds help us? Again, why should we care about birds? Birds can really help our mental and physical health just because birds are outside, and when we spend time in nature and in different habitats trying to track down different types of birds, any additional time spent in nature is amazing for both our mindfulness and calm, our mental and physical well-being. We have exercise, of course, when we hike around looking for birds, or even just walking around slowly. Any of that moving is great for our bodies. And then of course they bring us joy. They are beautiful. Birds are very fun when you start birding to want to track down the next one and see all the different diversity of species out there. And so, yeah, they emotionally, they give us a lot. Bird watching keeps our brains active because we're using our different senses, sight, sound, and to identify birds, we have to really actively engage our memory to remember all the bird songs and which species it goes to or which one looks like what.
And what is that little bird?
Yeah, this is a not amazing photo that I took of a Kentucky warbler that came into my backyard during migration. So during migration, there's just millions of birds in the air moving through. And so they'll stop down into habitat that they don't necessarily use for breeding, but they're just stopping along the way. And this one was in my grass in my backyard and I almost lost my mind. So very exciting.
What fun.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of people are birding. This is another thing I want to make note of before we get into eBird. There are a ton of people out there looking at birds. And 96 million people in the US, according to this US Fish and Wildlife Service 2022 survey in the United States, 96 million people in the US photograph birds or feed birds or watch birds. That's more than 35% of the nation's population 16 and over. And the estimated total number of bird watchers is more than double the figure from this same survey back in 2016. So just in 6 short years, that number has doubled. And I do think that that is in large part because of eBird. eBird has grown in popularity, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But really what we thought we knew about bird watchers, you know, if you close your mind and picture a bird watcher, you may envision someone who's a little bit older. That's likely because that person may be retired or have more time to go around and bird. But really when we look at the age ranges here from that same survey, here's the picture of the cover of that survey. It really runs the gamut of all of these different age groups, which is quite shocking. Not many outdoor activities are loved by that many people across all ages. Then when we look by race and ethnicity, it's also very popular across a broad spectrum of our nation, which is really, really amazing. It's really exciting. Then go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm agreeing. Yeah, it's very exciting and so diverse.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And birders are out there spending money. It's a big economic driver as well, which I always like to mention because we don't honestly always pair up our outdoor activities with how much money they're out there spending. But, you know, birders are traveling around to see different birds in different parts of the world or across the state. They're paying for lodging and food and transportation and fuel. And all of those things add up to a lot of money. You can see there on the screen, $14.5 billion just in 2022. So it's pretty wild. I like to think that birding brings us together. It's an activity that anyone can do, whether you are able to get around everywhere. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it, which Kristen Heath-Aker, our ornithologist at MDC, she covered that very well in our first birding webinar, which you can find a recording of on the MDC website where you registered for this webinar. All right, we're going to get into it. What is eBird? eBird is an online database of birder sightings. And it's a very popular one. It gained in momentum probably the most rapidly in about 2012. So it's been around for longer than that, but it really has become so popular in the last 12 or 13 years. It gets about 100 million bird records submitted annually. And it is global. It's not just in the United States. And it grows about 20% each year. It hasn't slowed down since its beginning. So we can visualize all of these bird detections across the globe by mapping all of them like we see here. So each yellow dot is a bird observation. You can see that there's heavy concentrations of people using eBird and logging bird observations in the US and Europe in particular, but they are on every continent across the globe. You can even see people eBirding, using eBird and logging birds on ships crossing our oceans. You can see along those main routes there that a lot of pelagic tours go to, and people
That's
shipping
so
things.
cool.
Yeah, like shipping routes.
Overwhelmingly amazing. Wow.
It is really incredible. You know, back in 2021, eBird reached 1 billion bird observations. So this blows away every other way that citizen scientists have to record birds or any taxa on the planet. And then 3 years later, in 2024, they'd already almost reached 2 billion by reaching, 1.85 billion bird observations just 3 years later. So it's just growing like crazy. It's crazy.
It's amazing.
It really is. So this is just another way to visualize growth here since 2012. Each year they're experiencing, again, about 20% growth. There's 1.1 million registered eBirders online. I can tell you how to get involved in eBird here in a few slides. But yeah, 138.2 million checklists have been submitted across all time. 20 of those just in 2024. So you can see that it just keeps ramping up. And then again, they're at 1.85 billion detections. It's the largest citizen science effort by leaps and bounds. So that is all well and good, Sarah. That's just mind-blowing. But what the heck is eBird even used for? Why do we care about this? So I'm going to go over just really briefly 4 main reasons or ways that you can use eBird. eBird helps you find more birds and it gives you real-time locations. So prior to eBird, there was no online centralized way for you to keep track of your personal bird lists, your observations. A lot of bird watchers keep something called a life list, which is just a list of all the birds that you've seen in your life. A lot of people keep state lists or country lists or county lists. And so it's just a centralized way that it can keep all of those data for you. So you can keep all of that stuff in one place along with your bird photos and your audio recordings and your media. And it can help you to explore the latest sightings from across the world. So including finding rare birds. So in the past, in the good old days, well, in the old days anyway, people used to call each other on the phone and spread the word via phone trees. So for young people who are watching this webinar, a phone tree, a calling tree was, you would call someone, they would call someone else. And you'd spread the word to talk about, hey, I saw a rare bird at Eagle Bluffs Conservation Area. And everybody would call each other on the phone. And they used to be called rare bird hotlines. Now with eBird, you can view any birding site at an eBird hotspot online in near real time. So this helps you find more birds and you can see birds around the world and what birds people are seeing where. Now, one thing I'll focus on today big time is how all of these observations inform science and help us to target conservation actions for those birds just because there is so much data. Okay. So this is how you use eBird. I'm just going to walk through a few screenshots here of how to navigate some of the main parts of eBird, but a lot of it will just take a little bit of time and clicking around on the site. Now, there's one way that you can find birds is to search by eBird hotspot, which all conservation areas run by the Missouri Department of Conservation, all Department of Natural Resources state parks, all of those public lands are automatically hotspots in the state. So you can really zoom in and easily find those public lands in particular, but really most public parks and great birding locations in the state, most of which are all free to access, are eBird hotspots in the system already. So if you go to these places and bird, you want to choose an eBird hotspot so that all the data from that hotspot is logged together and they can track the trend over time. So this is a screenshot of just all the hotspots in Missouri. I know you can't see the full outline of Missouri, but you see a big clump of hotspots around Kansas City on the left side of your screen, St. Louis on the right side of your screen, and then Columbia and Jefferson City there in the middle. And the warmer the color on the spectrum is the more species that have been observed at each of those sites. So some of those red markings you see have 400 and 500 species logged at those sites, which is really amazing.
Wow, it looks like most of Missouri is a great place for bird watching. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. There's hotspots all over the place, and there's no doubt that you can find one near you to try out birding. I'll tell you a little bit later too, and on eBird, you can make your own backyard, your own type of personal hotspot. So you can just log all your things really easily in the same place. But when you click on one of these hotspots, say I zoomed in and I click Eagle Bluffs, then you can click on View Details. You can see here that 293 different species have been logged at Eagle Bluffs on different eBird checklists throughout time, and that site has 13,940 checklists submitted just for that one area. It's a wetland area, so it attracts lots of biodiversity and lots of different birds. When you click on View Details, you can see that total number again. You can see the species that have been seen most recently. I took a screenshot here on here just a few weeks ago. So you see that Joseph was there and Skylar and Greg. You can see all of their different checklists. And if you click on the date on there, you can see the total checklists that those people submitted. So it's pretty cool. You can, oftentimes when I go to Eagle Bluffs, you know, the day before, the morning I go out, I check eBird and say, well, what have people been seeing there? Just so that I can kind of get a baseline, maybe get excited about some of the birds people are seeing.
Oh,
You
it's
can,
so helpful. It looks so helpful and easy to follow.
absolutely. You can also see all the media, all the photos and the videos that people have submitted just for that site. So it's very cool. It's all in one place. You can also search for a species. So let's say that Jill asked me, where can I find a cerulean warbler this summer? And so you can use eBird to look at just one type of species. So if you click on species maps on the eBird website, you can see my cursor. I have typed in cerulean warbler here because I'm just looking for a map of that, where that species has been seen. I've narrowed my date range here, which is very helpful. If you know you're going to be going to a certain area in spring of next year, you can look up that hotspot or that region by that date. It's really amazing. You can look at all years ever. You can look at just the last 2 years. You can really do anything you want and parse out this data. But I have chosen June and July of just last year. So I know that the bird was seen there very recently. So hoping that it will be there this summer. So once you do that, you get this map, which this is showing you checklists that include a cerulean warbler. So when I zoom in a little bit more, you can see these little blue flame icons, and each of those is a checklist that someone submitted at that site where they saw a cerulean warbler. And then when you click on one of those icons, you can see, oh, well, Holly Coates saw one at Echo Bluff State Park down in the Ozarks. If you click on the date next to it, you can see Holly's full checklist of all the birds that she saw. Yeah, at that site, it shows how long she birded and how far she walked and stuff like that. So
how'd you get to that map? Could you go back one step? How did you get to the map of species?
Yeah, you just click on the date right here. That shows you the full checklist.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And this one is just a zoomed in map of this purple one. It just doesn't show you all the icons because it would be a mess. But the more you zoom in, you can see the icons, and then you can click on the date, and that will show you that one checklist.
Very helpful.
Yeah, another way that you can look at a specific site like Eagle Bluffs, here I've chosen Eagle Bluffs, you can see, and it can give you this information in a bar chart format. Now, how this can help you is you can say, oh, I'm going to be in Eagle Bluffs in, like I said, April next year. So if I just click May or March or April, it will only show me species seen at that site during that month. It just narrows it down to just those species. And you can see that black-bellied whistling duck are seen sometimes. So the thinner the bar, the least often the bird is seen. So these fat bars, there's Canada geese at Eagle Bluffs almost all the time.
All the time.
Right? All the time. And then maybe a little bit less often in November, right? Because their bar is a little bit skinnier here.
And mallards, I'm seeing that mallards are there kind of year round.
Yep. That's true. Yep. And then if we scroll down and you saw other songbirds that maybe are migratory, they would only be seen here, like this black-bellied whistling duck, and they'd only show in May, June, and July because that's their breeding season, and then they leave. So yeah.
Very helpful.
Another really bird nerdy way that you can use eBird, which I think is a good thing, I include myself in that description as well, is you can set up eBird alerts. Now, ABA is the American Birding Association. They keep a very specific list of all the birds in the Americas. But this alert is really just for any bird that's found outside of its normal range. You can receive an alert for all of those birds, like across the whole country. But in case you wanted to zoom in, you can click Rare Bird Alerts and sign up for this type. Now you can enter a region. Missouri counts as a region, or you can put in your county, or you can put in your state. And if a bird is considered rare and not normally found in that county or state, it'll shoot you an email, any bird, any species. And so that's a way, there's a lot of birders out there that can be really hardcore, and they can chase birds, which means if they heard that a rare bird is somewhere near them or a state or two away, someplace where the bird never occurs, they'll jump in their car and drive there as fast as possible to try and see it. And then the needs alert at the bottom, this is just, if you're keeping a county list or a state list, you're like, I really need this species, like maybe a cerulean warbler in Missouri or something more rare. And I want to know, just one species at my region. So it'll send you an email if it sees that particular species in your region.
Okay, so you could focus on specific species too.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of my eBird, which is literally just a tab that you choose on the eBird website. And this is compiling all of my life list, all the species I've ever seen. It may seem like a lot of species observed, but it's not for a really good birder. So don't laugh at me, all you hardcore birders watching this. But it shows the total species I've observed, all my checklists. I can't believe I have 600 checklists, by the way. I just realized that looking at this.
Wow.
I don't have very many. Yes, there are a lot. I don't have a lot of species with photos because I'm not a big photographer, but this is a great way for bird photographers. If you're logging eBird lists, you can pair up your photos and videos and things like that with your sightings, and it keeps them all in one place online. You can look at your different lists by the country. You can look at them by major regions. So if you're a big world traveler birder, you can kind of, again, it's a fun way to visualize all the hard work you've put into and all the fun you've had going out to see birds.
Right, this is pretty impressive. A question, now you can open up your list and see everything on your activities. Can other people look at this? Or like if I wanted to know what Sarah's doing, can I check out Sarah's and can you check out mine and things like that?
Yeah, so there isn't a way to like track what people are doing because they don't want people to start following people around or anything
Right,
like
so
that.
this is for you, because I think
It's
people
for
would want
me.
to know. This is for you to know. Others don't have
Correct.
access to all of this data. Okay.
That's correct. You can make an eBird profile, like you see mine on the left there. I've added a photo and stuff like that. So you can look at other people's profiles and just see very general information, like which countries they've birded. But other than that, no, it's not saying, you know, each list and every place you've gone and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's some privacy there if people are concerned.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. These are just a few of those few photos that I've taken. But again, if you're a bird photographer, this is just a really cool aspect of eBird, is that you can keep all your pictures in the same place. Here's one of my favorite pictures of a resplendent quetzal from Costa Rica. And then it has the date down there. It tells me exactly where I saw it. And so it's kind of fun to click through your pictures and kind of remember all of your fun birding trips.
That's an amazing looking bird. Wow.
It is, and that's just an immature one. The adult males have tail plumes. They have 2 of them, and they're like twice that long. It's crazy. Beautiful bird. Okay, and like I said it before, in eBird, you can make a yard list. You can choose your location at your home and just name it yard, and then easily you can just grab it every time if you want to keep track of the birds that are in your yard. These are a few pictures from my yard a few years ago when we had a ton of rose-breasted grosbeaks. You see there on the right and the top left. They staged here in Missouri before, I think there was snow up on the ground up in Minnesota and in northerly parts of their breeding range. And so a lot of these rose-breasted grosbeaks hung out in Columbia, mid-Missouri for weeks and weeks before heading north. So they were just everywhere. And then that Baltimore Orioles, on the bottom left, and there were a ton of them that year too. So
Sarah, I'm so glad you bring this up, because as you mentioned, when we were talking with Kristen, you don't need to travel the world or really anywhere outside, even your living room window. So if people have some limitations, again, you could bird from the comfort of your living room looking out into your yard.
Absolutely. And, you know, putting up different types of bird feeders, like you see my sunflower seed and in those types of feeders. But, you know, grosbeaks are pretty, I mean, they can do it, but they don't really prefer to perch on a little tiny perch on a bird feeder. They like that platform feeder. So sometimes if you put out a diversity of different types of feeders, like a suet feeder, a few different types of seed, thistle for goldfinches, and maybe a platform feeder, kind of bigger birds like cardinals and grosbeaks like that, like an open platform area. Now you'll have to deal with squirrels, but yeah, you can attract a lot of different species even to your yard. And if you put out water, then you get even more. So it's a fun way to track it. Now, when oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry. You mentioned kind of keeping squirrels out, and you know, Jean wanted to know, how do you keep squirrels and raccoons out? It's kind of unique to your situation, and they sell a lot of products to do that, and there are a lot of tips, and
yes,
it's a big challenge.
Yes, it is a challenge. It's a challenge for me too, Jean. They are in there all the time, and if you place your shepherd's hook that holds a platform feeder like that out in the middle open part of your yard, you have to get a tall shepherd's hook too. If you get a kind of a standard size one, they can just jump from the ground. But if you put up one of those really taller shepherd's hooks, put out a platform feeder and then put a squirrel baffle on the post. That can kind of keep them from jumping up, but it is hard to keep them away, no doubt. Now, this Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which I'll talk about on my next slide, they also provide a ton of education resources on their website. And all of these are linked together through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So at most places on these bird checklists, you can click on any of the species and get all of this information. It's like an online field guide for each of these birds. And so it links up with other media or other education resources like allaboutbirds.org, which is like an online field guide. You can learn about birds. Like you see on the left, you can see their range. You can see different pictures of them, videos, audio. It's amazing. And that's because the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is just like the premier place for bird education. They have classroom curricula. You can pay to take identification courses, but there are also free courses on there as well. They run eBird. They run Merlin. You can see that down there in the bottom left. This is a free bird ID app that you can put on your phone. And it can ID birds by sound. You can put in a description of a bird that you see, and it'll give you options of what it could be, so you can do research right there on your phone. And then the Cornell Lab runs the Macaulay Library. So anytime you attach a photo, audio recording, or video recording to an eBird list, it's all automatically compiled into the Macaulay Library. It's cited with your name. They give you credit for all of your media, but the Macaulay Library has existed since 1929, and it's kind of the historic repository of all bird research because there's a big ornithological lab at Cornell as well. And so it's really neat, some of like the historic recordings and video recordings they have in the Macaulay Library, including videos of like ivory-billed woodpeckers and things like that, just really old media like that. So it's all connected.
What a wealth of information. And I've used All About Birds quite a bit for some identification that our field guide doesn't cover. So it's great resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They do a lot of good work. And eBird is not excluded from that. So this is how you make an eBird list. So you're not just making an eBird account, you're making a Cornell Lab account. Now, it's super easy. It takes about 30 seconds to make an account. You just put your name, username, a password, and an email. Now, you'll be signed up for some free emails, that tell you about educational resources, but if that bugs you, you can unsubscribe from it. But really, you're not going to get a lot of extra things by signing up in this free account.
They're not going to spam you.
Exactly. And there's a free Cornell Lab Academy course on eBird Essentials, excuse me, that teaches you how to use it and all about it. So
how helpful.
Super easy. Yeah. And so when you're ready to get out there and log your bird sightings, you can use the app that you see there on the left. It's very easy to use. It just takes a few clicks to get in. If you turn on your location for eBird, which is the best way to use it because it'll help you find the nearest hotspot where you are. It's just very, very easy to get started. You can also, if you like to keep your bird lists on a piece of paper and you log the time and the distance that you go and all of that information, you can also go onto ebird.org and just enter your information for a checklist too. Now I'm going to walk you through a few different screenshots of how you make a checklist and how to submit that. So this is what one of my checklists look like from last summer. This track you see here on the left, that's just for my view. That doesn't show to the public where exactly you went. But we'll show you a few different features here. So you see the date, you see the location. This is clearly a hot spot. I chose Lake of the Ozarks State Park. If you want to say in there like which trail you walked, you can add that under edit location. There's a place to put comments for your checklist. You can put the weather that you experienced, where you walked, just other weird things you saw that will be visible on the website when you submit your checklist, but you don't have to put anything if you don't want. Yeah, the location, all of that. And then the amazing part about eBird that's able to contribute all of these bird data to science is because it's logging a measure of your effort, which means it's logging automatically for how long you have the app on and how long you're moving and using it. It logs how much time you spent birding. It also, takes this track, which you can edit. If you leave it on and you drive 10 miles back home, it tracks you there too, but you could edit that track. I'm not speaking from experience or anything, but the way it tracks your effort like this feeds into scientific models to help model the abundance of birds across the landscape. Because without doing that, they're just showing you raw counts of birds, and really to help feed into the model, it needs that level of effort. You're also counting the number of individuals you see on an eBird checklist. That's another way that they can feed into these models. They don't just want to know where birds are or are not. They want to know how many and in what number. That can be a little bit intimidating to people who start eBird, but you really get used to it. You know, there's a big difference in it from going out and seeing 10 robins to 1. So you really want to log the number of individuals.
All right. Couple questions.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at this, you spent 1 hour and 1 minute on the app on this adventure, and then you covered 1.5 miles.
Yeah, I'm a fast walker.
I mean, that also helps you as far as your steps, getting your steps in. So even from a health perspective, eBird can help you.
Yeah, man, birding is really good for you.
Right?
It's good for exercise.
1.5 miles today while I was looking at a bunch of birds. How great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to walk you through a few different pages that just focus on our beautiful state of Missouri. So I just think it's really interesting to look at the places where people are birding the most. So on the left there, you see checklist leaders. That pretty much just means the spots in our state that are birded the most, that have the most people visiting them and submitting the most checklists. And so Riverlands Migratory Bird Sanctuary is run by the Audubon Center. It's the Audubon Center at Riverlands is located there, as well as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They run that Riverlands Bird Sanctuary. It's right outside of St. Louis. So you can imagine most of our birders are clumped up around our urban areas. And so those are some of the most visited sites. Eagle Bluffs is here outside of Columbia, where I'm located, and just an incredibly popular spot to bird because it's a wetland area. And of course, that attracts a lot more species. And then if you look over on the right, these are the eBird hotspots in the state that have the most species logged at them. So you can see other places like Lusk Bluffs, that's very rural. You know, it's north of Kansas City, so it's within a few hours of an urban area. But that one is a little bit more off the beaten path. And look how many species it still has logged for it with far fewer checklists. You can compare them over there on the left side, comparing Riverlands to Lusk Bluffs. And I think that's just showing that our wetland areas are just these, hotspots of biodiversity and abundance. Most of those sites, those public lands on the right side, are intensively managed wetlands that are either owned by the Fish and Wildlife Service or the Missouri Department of Conservation. So it's showing you right there with the numbers how many birds these wetland units are supporting.
Right, and on our public lands. So how amazing. I mean, here's your conservation at work.
No kidding. Yeah, all of them are refuges or conservation areas. That Audubon Center, which is also run by the Army Corps of Engineers. Yeah, more public land. It's really cool. We're very lucky here in Missouri, no doubt. You can also learn about birding activity using eBird data. So here is a map of the total checklists only on Missouri Department of conservation areas in 2022 by month. And so you can see that eBird activity is greatest in April and March, or March and April, some would say, and October.
Migration?
Yes, and that's during those migration periods. So birds that breed north of us or are migrating after breeding are moving through the state. And these are species that we may only be able to see during these peak migratory periods. So that's when birders go out to bird the most because they want to see things they can't always see. And this includes waterfowl, right? That's when they move through our state, many of them, and also little pretty jewels in the trees like warblers that breed north of us and in the boreal forest. And so it's the most exciting time for me to go out in the woods and try and find birds.
What an amazing uptick. Yeah, every spring.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible how many people are out there that we maybe don't even know are out there on our conservation areas. Year round, right? There aren't a whole lot of other user groups, I don't think, besides, hikers that are out on our sites every single month.
Right. So many, so often, all year long.
Definitely. Okay, so this is a graph of showing you eBird growth. And that eBird growth that we saw earlier that I mentioned is no exception here in Missouri. So the number of eBird checklists submitted in Missouri has more than doubled in the last 5 years. You can see on this graph from 2019 to 2024 that it's just more than doubled. It just continues to grow, grow, grow. And I really don't know if they even know if there's any end in sight. We just need more people to get out and bird. Maybe it'll go up even higher after this webinar because everybody's going to go to eBird.
Right. I have a quick question for you. Again, it's kind of a joke, but now eBirds, when you're making your checklists, these have to be free flying wild birds, right? You can't go to a zoo and claim it.
Correct.
So sorry, Jeff, you can't claim the birds at the St. Louis Zoo.
No, you can't. And, you know, eBird knows it's using science and range maps put in there by ornithologists. And so if you log a bird that's very rare or out of its normal range, it'll, you know, when you go to click the bird in your checklist, it has a little R by it, which means rare. And so for you to submit a checklist with rare birds on it, one or multiple, you have to go into the comments on that species alone and you have to explain the bird that you saw, what it looked like. And sometimes if it's super rare, you know, there's local reviewers that will go through people's checklists for these rare birds to kind of okay them to be posted online. And really, sometimes if you don't have a photo or audio recording or video, it's kind of hard to prove that what you saw is what you saw. So always document.
And there's some checks and balances. That's good to know.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, so this is just this is another visualization. Again, remember when we count the effort, the distance that we walk and the amount of time that we're eBirding, this is that in the last 5 years. And I just want to tell you that 102,000 hours is the time equivalent of 11.7 years. This is just people eBirding in Missouri. So imagine that globally. And this is just in 1 year. So I thought that was pretty mind-blowing when I did the math. I hope I did my math right, but I think I did.
Math is hard, but still 11, almost 12 years.
It's amazing.
A lot of time.
It's a lot of time. There's a lot of birders out there. So when we look at distance traveled, same thing. It just continues to increase. It kind of plateaued there from 2020 to 22, but look at that big jump during COVID, right? Between 2019 and 2020, a lot more people went out to bird. I know that Kristen shared this stat on the first webinar, but yeah, yard lists were up by 900% just in 2020 because people were birding at their homes.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is the distance equivalent of 6 times around the globe. So
a lot of steps.
A lot of steps out there. Okay, so I'm just going to share a few slides here. I'm talking about how eBird is contributing to science and conservation. So up in the top menu there, when you're on ebird.org, you can see science. So when you click on science, status and trends is the part of the website that has, I think, thousands at this point, thousands of species. And so when you click on a species or enter a species like wood thrush, this is what comes up. Now, in the past and all through time, when we have looked at a range map before, what a range map is, it's showing the parts of the world that a bird breeds, migrates through, and winters. And often they have looked like this. The red or orange color on the left map you see there is their breeding range. The yellow is where they migrate through, and the blue is where they overwinter. Now, the map on the right is built by eBird, and it's built by those birder checklists and that level of effort and the number of birds that people see. They're able to use scientific modeling to make this map, which is a map of relative abundance, which is just a way to estimate where birds are more and less abundant. So you can see the map on the right is much more useful in terms of research, conservation, knowing where to target our conservation efforts than maybe the map on the left, which just kind of infers that the birds are equally distributed across the whole range, which they aren't. So it's really cool to see the map on the right and see, especially on the wintering grounds, where these birds are more and less abundant so that we can work with partners on the wintering grounds, which is what I do for my job.
Right. Okay. And I love the darker color, the more concentrated sightings. So you could really, this really is helpful.
It is. And it's really cool because you can start to see the habitats in the state. And so when you look at the abundance of wood thrush are a mature forest breeding bird. So they need big blocks of forest. And so when you zoom in here to see where wood thrush are more or less abundant in the state, it really mirrors our ecoregions. And so the Ozarks there, we have the Ozark Highlands that reflect eastern temperate forests, and then the north and west of our state is mostly open grassland systems. So of course, these birds won't be found there as much because it doesn't have the habitat they need.
Right, so helpful. And even with the color concentrations within the state, that could help you find more wood thrushes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. Okay, so this is the part where it's feeding into conservation a little bit more. And this is just an amazing visualization that really helps to educate people about migration as well. So this is an animation. I'm going to press play here in a second, but it's going to walk you through the weeks of the year. You see on the right here, January, February. These are our months. And the darker the purple, the more the greater relative abundance is shown in the map. So you can see we're going to start in January. So this is where the birds are on their wintering grounds. So you can see high concentrations in the southern part of the Yucatan Peninsula, in Belize, in Guatemala, and then they kind of trickle through Central America as well. But I'm going to hit play on this, and it's going through weeks of the year. April, May comes up, they clump up, a lot of them jump the Gulf. And so this is where they're most abundant across their breeding range. They clump up again, and then they hop the Gulf again and migrate down to their wintering grounds.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
I agree. So when we look at a different type of species, both size-wise, just everything about its natural history, this is a grassland bird. This is a grasshopper sparrow. So they are breeding in open prairie and grassland systems. So you can see their wintering range right here that we're going to start with in January is much different. It's farther out west. There's some in Florida as well, not as far down in Central America, but this also reflects grassland systems. So we're getting in April, May, the birds shoot up north across the Great Plains. You can see higher concentrations in the northwest part of their range. They also breed and nest in Missouri. So you could see them across that part of the state as well, but just a very different life strategy because they need different habitat.
Right, and that is so visually amazing. I mean,
it really is.
See the movement and everything.
Yeah, and it's showing you how far these little birds migrate, sometimes over 1,000 miles each way, for those long distance migrants. It's really amazing.
Right, our little state bird here.
Yes, this is our eastern bluebird, of course. Yes, as you say, it is our state bird. And this map will look very different because this is a resident bird. This is not a long distance migrant. This is known as kind of a short or medium distance migrant, which means that this bird can breed across the entire range that's reflected on the map right now, but it also, as you see, will move up a little farther north. So I'll push play on this. You can see in April, May, it moves way farther up into southern parts of Canada, right? And across the northern Midwest. And then it comes back down and really concentrated in the kind of the southeastern quadrant of the country.
Hey, quick question, Sarah. The bluebirds kind of, down in Central America and Mexico, are they traveling to do they stay in those areas, or are they migrating to the big parts of the eastern United States?
So I am not sure about the populations that are down there, but I would imagine that if they're in tropical areas where they have the foods that they need, they're staying there.
I mean, why leave, right?
A lot of tropical birds, they just haven't evolved over millions of years to make that migratory jump. But I know very little about this species down in Central America. That actually piques my interest. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, that is.
Sorry, I don't have an answer.
It's okay. If you could beat a Missouri winter by going south, do it, right?
I know, right? Yes. I've been down there and it's quite lovely. I wouldn't want to leave either. Okay, now this is a prairie warbler. And the reason that I show this different species, I'm not going to show you the animation, but this is the abundance map. You could see in red there where it breeds, blue where it overwinters, and yellow where it's migrating through. Now, prairie warblers need a more specialized habitat than just forest or grassland like the previous species. They need shrubby habitats because that's where they nest. They nest in shrubs or small saplings. So this means that they require woodland or savanna habitat, which requires habitat management. So a lot of our conservation area managers that are out there helping to make our conservation areas amazing, they manage habitats like this. That means that they need to remove some trees so that the sunlight can reach the woodland floor to make it a woodland with that open canopy and really spur the growth of that shrubby vegetation on the ground. And so because of that, because they need this specialized habitat, you can see that this bird is not as widespread or abundant as a wood thrush or a grasshopper sparrow because it needs that more specialized habitat. And because it has so much data in eBird, eBird can also track the trends in relative abundance over time. So you can see here between 2012 and 2022 that it can track these populations to see which ones are declining in red and which ones are increasing. You can see very few populations are increasing in blue. So this helps us target conservation efforts and see where this bird really needs that conservation action and that habitat the most.
That's so helpful from the conservation perspective, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing information. And the more people contribute to eBird and all the more information that gets in there, this helps this even become more accurate and more vital, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it really helps us to target that work, no doubt.
And we can
No
see
doubt.
why it's more important and so incredibly important because of the bird loss.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, birds are declining. So in 2019, a really landmark paper in the journal Science quantified the net loss of birds in the US and Canada as about 3 billion birds lost, or 29% of our birds. So this decline can be caused by many things. For many of these species, many threats are at play: habitat loss, habitat degradation, pesticide use. Remember that 96% of our land birds are insectivorous, so they need those insects throughout their life cycle. And eBird can really help us to target conservation work by knowing where these birds are migrating to, where they're traveling through, and where they're spending the winter, so that we can work with partners across that full range to really target work to help slow that decline. And so again, these are a few of the maps that I use in my job. So in my job, I focus on full annual cycle conservation. Again, that's addressing the threats that especially migratory songbirds face throughout that full life cycle. Sometimes these birds are, well, oftentimes these birds are spending up to 8 months of the year south of our border, right? So we're not doing all we can for them conservation wise if we ignore the things that they're facing when they're gone 8 months of the year. So these are a few different maps. This shows the wintering ranges overlapped of 17 species of concern that breed in Missouri. And so this is showing us that working with partners that work on the wintering grounds of these species, like partners in Florida, partners in Arkansas and Texas for some of those grassland birds like Henslow's sparrows. This is where they go. Field sparrows go here, and then across Central America, we have partners down there as well that we work closely with to do habitat restoration, forest regeneration, forest loss and forest removal is a big threat down there. And so we work to address a lot of these factors. On the right here, with all of this wealth of eBird data, you can really drill down to just look at things like this, like 6 grassland species that are included in our Missouri Bird Conservation Plan. This just shows the overwinter ranges of just those grassland birds, and you can see it's quite different. A lot of Central America is removed because most of that is tropical forest, and it's really highlighting our open habitats across the tropics that our birds, quote, our birds that breed in Missouri are using. So you can see big patches in Venezuela where our eastern kingbird overwinters. You can see way down in Argentina, in the Pampas, where bobolinks, one of our grassland birds, overwinters. So these birds are flying over 1,000 miles one way. It's just really amazing.
It is, and it gives us, sometimes we get a bit myopic and self-focused. This gives us this really global perspective, and it's so informative. I didn't know all of this.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and another amazing part is that there's so many birders out there globally. Like a lot of these data are populated by people who live in these countries and they're out birding. It's not just tourists from the US traveling around and birding, but it's really become a global phenomenon. As you say, it is really amazing. We do sometimes get very myopic. Oftentimes people see our birds here. They're, our most beautiful migrants like Baltimore Orioles, rose-breasted grosbeaks. We see those at our feeder and we feel that they're our birds because they come here to breed. But really, these birds are only spending 3 or 4 months here. And really, they're just tropical birds that have evolved over time to take advantage of our flush of vegetation and abundant insects during the growing season in the summer. So it's really incredible to think about it like that really they're just following the food.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just have 2 more of these maps. I won't bore you with maps all night long, I promise. But it's really interesting that you can flip these maps around. So the one on the left is a map of the birds that overwinter in Belize. and show which states that they're dependent on for breeding habitat the most. And so if we want to target partner work in Belize, that would be great for us here in Missouri because our Ozarks are a hot spot for a lot of the species that overwinter there. Folks down in Louisiana, maybe with their state agency or conservation nonprofits in Louisiana might want to try and find partners in Belize because that's where, quote, their birds are going to overwinter. And then you can see Costa Rica on the right, where clearly Costa Rica is providing a lot of habitat for those boreal nesting songbirds in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and also in southeastern Canada. So really interesting to kind of look at those, and eBird has so much data that you can just visualize it in many different ways to inform that conservation work. So when the science, oh, go ahead.
Oh, just amazing. I mean, the wealth of information, and this is basically free for people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. It like all of us going out to bird helps eBird, and then eBird helps us by spitting out these amazing maps to get us all excited about the birds. So in this science paper showing the declines of the quantified net bird loss in the US and Canada, these 7 simple actions were also released to tell the public and bird lovers what they could do to help birds in the face of these declines. And one of these is that you can do citizen science. So that means you can submit your bird sightings to places like eBird, or you can get involved in a National Audubon Society's Christmas bird count. You can sign up to do a breeding bird survey route, which you have to know all your birds by sight and sound, but you go drive a set route, the same route every single year during the same time of year, and you count all the birds you see and hear every half-mile stop for 3 minutes. And so if you're a really great birder who knows all your birds by sight and sound, we really need you to submit what you see. But there's lots of different ways to get involved in citizen science, but eBird is certainly the biggest effort thus far.
Right, and I will build on that, Sarah. We invite folks, if you haven't registered yet, to please register for our May 1st webinar on 7 simple actions to help birds at home. And we will be having Dana Ripper of the Missouri River Bird Observatory on to talk more about these 7 simple actions. So register for that one too.
Yes, that'll be a good one too. Dana and Ethan run the Missouri River Bird Observatory, and they're just incredible professionals doing a lot of great work. So I would encourage you that if you know your birds or you want to get involved, even if you're a new person to birding, eBird is a great place to start. And really, these are such important efforts to log what we see because these track the number of birds across our landscape over time, over long periods of time. And they help us to keep tabs on things like these bird declines that were able to be quantified. A lot of that quantification was based on these huge long-term data sets. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on this inaugural Missouri Birding Challenge that we're helping to kick off with this webinar. So this challenge, we don't want to call it a competition because we have tried to make it not overly competitive. But it's going to be between May 1st and 15th, 2025. You can register online at this website starting April 1st, and registration will go straight up to the day before the challenge begins. And really, the challenge was developed to get new folks involved in birding. Now, birding can be really intimidating. There's a lot of birds out there. There's a lot of people who seem very good at it, but everybody has to start somewhere. And so we've made 5 categories for different age groups and birding situations as part of the challenge. We have nestling and fledgling youth categories. We have a backyard birder category. It's just for members of the same household to bird together in their backyard. You only have to submit a small number of eBird lists. You can sign up for the dabbler category. So that's a category for folks to get out and visit some new birding sites around them. Maybe they've birded before, or maybe you just want to jump in and start there. And then competitive coot is really the only category that logs the number of species that you see. So a lot of traditional old school birding competitions are just for if you see the most species, then you win. And we didn't want to set up our challenge that way. So this is kind of a gentle introduction to birding. Each of the categories will have a raffle for prizes. And so it's not just the person who's seen the most. Everybody will be entered per category into a raffle. So the cool thing about the challenge, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that adding a little bit of competition into it makes it just a little bit more interesting time to time. It's not the same old thing. But we're using eBird to track those sightings. So everybody who participates has to go on to that Cornell site, take 30 seconds and make your eBird profile, because that's how we're going to track our checklist. So we'll need one adult or person 16 years of age or older in each competition or each challenge team to make an eBird account and to send in your checklist that way. So the full rules and the how-to documents we've made eBird how-to documents. Those will be online at that website too very soon.
Right, and let's build on that a little bit. You covered so much of this. You can go to the website now for information, including our upcoming webinars and links to our past webinar in case you missed it. And we'll be adding this webinar on there shortly. Also, yes, there are some fees, but all of those fees go toward migratory bird conservation efforts. And there's going to be some great prizes. Again, binoculars, gift cards, other things that have been donated by some of our supporters. So
Yes.
again, we encourage you to attend all of these. And we have some upcoming webinars also building on this, right, Sarah?
Yes. So next month I will be presenting on Missouri birds and their habitats. So that will be more of like an ID and habitat course than this one. And you'll have to remind me of the date of it, Joe.
Thursday, folks, March 6th, again from 6 to 7. So you could go to our Missouri Birding Challenge website and register through that. We'll also be posting these up on social media. So Sarah, you're coming back with us next month, Missouri Birds and Habitats.
Yes.
And then Kristen Heathacre, our ornithologist, will be back in April talking about the full annual cycle of bird conservation. And then, as we mentioned, Dana from the Missouri River Bird Observatory will be here May 1st to talk about the 7 simple actions. And all of this gearing up for the Missouri Birding Challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really encourage everybody to get involved. If you're new to birding, this Missouri Birding Challenge will be really fun. I think for the entry level categories, I think you only have to submit like 5 to 10 eBird checklists, which is very doable, especially in that 2-week time frame. So I really encourage you guys to get involved and try it out and just see if you like it. So that is all I had, Joe. I'm happy to take any questions that people may have asked. I know we just have a few moments.
Yes, folks, we have a few minutes here, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for submitting your questions throughout. We answered some of them during that. Sarah, we had a number of questions from folks just about the basics of eBird, how to start your list, your yard list. Folks, I know we went over this pretty quickly, but as Sarah pointed out, eBird has a kind of a tutorial in and of itself, right?
Yes, yes. Yes, they do. They have a tutorial. And when you make a birding checklist and you go to submit it, you have to choose a location. And so it'll automatically know where you are if you have your location on your cell phone. Okay. And so it'll show a little spot where you are, and you can just rename it yard and have it saved so that you can add stuff to it later.
Okay, so for those questions we had about eBird, eBird can answer them once you get into it. It's pretty user-friendly and intuitive. And is Merlin, now Merlin is an ID, eBird is for reporting. Are those two connected or tied in any way?
They are connected and tied in. I mean, they're both run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and especially now over the last few years, they have made amazing ties between the two. Like I was talking about earlier, when you make an eBird list, you can click on any of those species and it's hopping over to Merlin and pulling from that database of information to educate you about the bird, play its song, show you where it lives and the habitat that it uses. So those are very closely linked. Now, what I have to warn people about with eBird is that Merlin now has a song ID part. And so you can click song ID if you hear a bird song, and if it's reaching your microphone, it can tell you what birds are singing around you. And it just populates a list right in front of you because it's hearing those songs and identifying them. And then if a bird continues to sing or sings again after a moment, the name of that bird will highlight. So it's in real time showing you which bird is singing. It's really incredible. But I really warn people against making an eBird list directly from that list of ID from the song ID and Merlin, because it's not always accurate. You have to double check it and verify visually too.
A quick question from Kim and Jeff. On the breeding bird survey that happens, every spring, summer? Mm-hmm. And you use Merlin to help you with that as far as identifying.
You can use it to help you, but yeah, we ask that you don't just, populate the list using your phone and then mark down birds.
Right.
We ask that people doing the breeding bird survey know, nearly all of their birds by sight and sound. And so you got to practice a lot. And you can use Merlin to practice for, a year or so before you sign up for it. But I have definitely done that as well. I have, finished my 3 minutes on a breeding bird survey route stop. And then when I'm done with the count, I may have written down a note about what the song sounded like if I was unsure, and then checked it afterwards. And yeah, I've double checked myself like that. But yeah, we really want people to visually confirm and really be positive rather than just populating a list with the eBird sound ID.
Okay. One last question. Ed wants to know, any birding magazines to recommend that are of a particular interest or particularly good, and especially any international birding magazines that you could recommend?
Magazines. I don't know of any that are free. Our Missouri Conservationist magazine is amazing, but it doesn't focus just on birds. I think Birds in Blooms is a good one that I think a lot of birders read, but of course it costs something, but I can't really promote one magazine over another. I know that if you contribute, I think you can subscribe maybe, or just contribute to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They have an incredible magazine. It's called Living Bird. And I think you can either give a donation or just pay for a subscription, and it goes towards their lab and bird conservation. But that is a beautiful magazine. It's a little bit more technical, but it's for the general public. But they tell you about bird research that's going on. They'll probably tell you less about bird ID. But I'm not sure of any other magazines, but those are the ones that pop to mind.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight for our webinar on using eBird. We encourage you to join us again for our upcoming webinar. The next one will be again with Sarah on March 6th. And we encourage you to get outside and discover nature and watch some birds, because birds are awesome. And thank you, Sarah, for leading our presentation tonight.
Of course, happy to be here. Thanks for all you guys do.
Have a great night, folks.